Hello, welcome to another week in astronomy. Not necessarily the biggest news, but what caught the interest of this idiot behind the microphone. Firstly, it's nice to see Hayabusa turning towards home, having left the asteroid Ryugu this Wednesday. I've already made a video about Hayabusa which I'll link to in the description, so I won't bore you for that one, but to put it simply, I'm very interested in sample return. I believe if we want to learn more about objects in space, such as asteroids, it's vital we bring samples back to Earth, because then we can bring the full brunt of human scientific equipment on them, rather than relying only on the instruments that we tend to send into space. I also think this is a vital thing if we want to keep the cost of space missions more reasonable, because if every mission needs its own set of complex analytic equipment, expenses are quickly going to spiral. And I'm very optimistic about this. Hayabusa 2 has had a successful campaign. Learning from the troubles of its predecessor, Hayabusa 1, it's done well at collecting its samples, its rovers deployed and have done their roving, and now all that's left is to return successfully, so let's hope I haven't jinxed it. The craft is carrying home two types of sample, firstly regolith, the stuff at the surface of the asteroid, and secondly subsurface material, which are caught by firing a projectile at the planet's surface. Now, I'm no expert in geology, so I can't give much detail here, but in short, material that we bring back can tell us information about how that material was formed, the conditions that formed it, the timescale that it formed over, that sort of thing. Combine that with our current ideas of astronomy to better understand its formation, and because it's expected to have preserved well material from the early solar system, we should be able to learn more about the formation of the inner rocky planets, which is good because that includes Earth, and it would be very useful to know how our own planet formed in a better amount of detail. One other interesting thing happening is the transit of Mercury. It happened on November the 11th, and basically a transit is where your orbiting object passes, from our point of view, in front of a star. So Mercury passing in front of the Sun relative to where we're looking at it. In a way, what I find interesting is that something so simple as a planet passing in front of a star can have such importance to astronomy. A quick look at the Wikipedia page, because just the transit of Mercury has its own page. It links to some of the science done using that transit, for example measuring the mass of Venus using variations in Mercury's orbit, or looking for variations in the radius of the Sun. Going further afield, transits in general are very useful in the astronomy of searching for extrasolar planets. What's known as the transit method is one of the major ways of detecting them. We see a periodic dimming of a star when some of its light is blocked by an orbiting planet. It's also useful if we want to work out some properties of that planet. So if light from a star passes through the planet's atmosphere, we expect interactions and perhaps emission of light indicating spectra, not what we would get from the star itself. We can also compare the signal from when the planet is in front of the star to when it's behind the star, and that can start helping us get some of an idea of the composition of the planet. So overall, transits, despite being a very simple thing, are incredibly important and incredibly useful to astronomy. And finally, something slightly different, but something that made me think. It was an article that I found while stumbling around the internet about a planetarium in Bangladesh called the Bangabandhu Novo Theatre in Dhaka. It's meant to be a planetarium and science-themed exhibition centre, and I found this article by the Daily Star, an English-language newspaper in Bangladesh. Not the one in England, it's a common name for a paper. The article's fairly short and blunt, saying the place is run down and disappointing. That's the main sort of point of the article. With a grand dream of informing citizens about astronomy and encouraging youngsters to pursue the subject, contrasted against the reality of poorly maintained grounds, broken exhibits, and the same shows running for years and years and years. It was a brief story, but one that made me reflect. Because I live in England, the wealth of good places to entice me into studying science was far easier for me to reach. While it'll never be perfect, in many cities there are great museums of science and attractions to do with science, and often some of the best have free entry and are being accessible for many people because they're in major cities. There's often some good science that you can see for very low cost. There's also local shows too, which were very important. My early experience of astronomy was because local astronomical groups near where I grew up got together yearly to put on a free display. You still have to be able to get to them, and I was privileged to have a family who could afford to keep getting me to these places, but so much was done to make my enticement easy. And I suppose then that article made me wonder, what would I have been doing had I grown up in Bangladesh? What the article is describing is the country's only planetarium, and I wonder if I'd had the fortitude to keep going if I hadn't been regularly reignited by visits to wonderful places, or local experiences of science. I suppose I feel sad when I see this. The bigger trouble that I see is things such as poor maintenance and lack of novelty. The longer you wait, the more it costs to fix and the more difficult it is. A pool that would have just needed a better pump, maybe, to keep the water flowing, now needs complete draining. Grass that could just do with a mow now needs manpower to get rid of the tougher stuff before you even get started. And reputation takes years to rebuild. The longer they wait to spruce the place up, the less effect they can expect in terms of bringing visitor numbers back up. It's a place I'd never heard about until this Friday, but now I dearly hope for it. I believe investing in encouraging science is something that, if it's done wisely, is incredibly valuable economically. But if it's done poorly, it's worse than useless. You end up throwing large sums of money for little reward, building extortionate buildings and grand exhibits and then letting them die. So I'll end there, in hope and in gratitude for the tremendous luck which allowed me to end up where I am now. Goodbye.